Hi guys, I'm here to talk about how the Teletubbies are actually an allegory for World War II. Now, you may think that seems a little insane and whatnot, but you see, I think that each Teletubby is actually a representation of of each major player of the World Wars. Now, not just by nation, but by the major groups, I mean. But there are four of them obviously, and you may think that there are only three major groups in World War II, but there are actually four from if you look close enough. So let's start with Tinky Winky, right? So Tinky Winky is, of course, the purple Teletubby. One of my favorites. One of my favorites. If not my favorite, really. And he represents, the capitalist countries, but not the capitalist countries like Britain and France. That's a different one, or a different Teletubby. No, he represents America, uh, uh, yeah, basically, and he represents the capitalist, like kind of way of that kind of stuff and how his purse in many ways represents the money form and status kind of thing about America and how it puts money into use, uh, because purses are like signs of like wealth and whatnot, right? So yeah, yeah, and he's also the oldest of the Teletubbies, uh, kind of showing that America is kind of like was very well like the older brother of all the nations at the time, mainly because of its major importance after World War I, right? So that is Tinky Winky. Uh, now, so it's a little weird with Poe, but Poe is kind of similar. Poe obviously kind of resembles the communist countries and actually is a metaphor for the communist countries, mainly the Soviet Union. Uh, Obviously, he's the complete opposite of Tinky Winky by age, showing how capitalism and communism are complete opposites with one another. Also, the red of Poe shows that Poe is a symbol of the communist way, communist red, obviously. But most importantly, Poe's scooter is a representation of the modernization effects and the forceful modernization of communist countries, mainly the Soviet Union and communist China, how they use tractors and stuff like mechanized machines to try to modernize their economy. It's also important to point out that Poe is the youngest of all of them, and communism was very young during the start of World War II. Not really that young, it was probably like a century old, but for an ideology that's pretty young. You could say that fascism is younger, but I think Lala is the older one because fascism uh, tries to get into the older roots of an ideology, you know. So it tries to really look into the past, while communism really likes to go into the future, which is obviously where, youngness and where younger stuff kind of comes in. Then, of course, there is Dipsy, who represents the colonial powers, Britain and France. Uh, of course, Dipsy's hat represents fashion and how high status and high fashion always represented a major thing and a major part of the colonial powers. So Dipsy is that kind of uh what do you call this uh figure of colonialism, Uh he is a representation of the British and the French by being a colonial power Teletubby. And finally, of course, there is Lala. Uh, and Lala is really the most interesting, I would say, because, well, she represents the axis or the more fastest powers. And her most obvious example is, of course, her ball, which represents world domination. Her always holding the ball to show that she wants to control the world, just like the fastest powers always wanted to do. But also her color, yellow, the color of energy, the energy that the fastest powers and the Axis powers used to try to conquer the world. Uh, and I think that yellow color of Lala really shows uh, and symbolizes that kind of energy that got the Axis powers and the fastest powers like Germany and Italy really conquer most of the world, but also led to their downfall by being ganged up by most of the world. So I think Lala kind of represents all of that with her yellow color. And, I think that really is why she is the most interesting of all the Teletubbies, at least for me. It's really opinionated, really. So that's what I think of Teletubbies. I think there's more to the Teletubbies than we may think. And yeah, that's what I think of the Teletubbies.